Kara, welcome to the show. Great to see you again.
Likewise, great to see you, Mike.
So I love a backstory. And so I ask every guest on my podcast what their first job was.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, it's good because we actually, I think, had that at one point up on our website at Moonrise, which we'll get into. But my first real job was selling shoes in a shoe store in the local mall. And I learned two things in that job. One was that I didn't really like working retail. And I really hated touching people's feet. It was just not for me. So yes, but my first true experience working was in a shoe store.
Well, it sounds like a great fit for you then.
Yeah,
Touching people's feet, working
right? Yeah.
How old were you?
I believe I was 16.
Okay, very cool. You kind of talked about what you didn't like. Did you learn anything from that experience though that sort of influenced your later choices on the positive side?
I would say, it was my first experience with obviously earning my own, real money. I like babysat and did odd things, prior to that, but earning like a true paycheck, with taxes coming out and all that. And, I realized how hard it was to make money, right? And how many hours I would go in and spend in that shoe store and come out with money that I wanted, whatever I wanted to buy at the time, whatever trendy item that my parents wouldn't buy me that I'd buy myself. It was a members only jacket. Now I'm really dating myself. But yeah, I think I really realized how hard, all these individuals that I interacted with in retail stores prior, right? Much older than I was, right? I realized how hard they were working to earn money. It definitely opened my eyes to that for sure.
Very cool. So you and I are talking because we know each other from a few years back. And we're going to talk about your company, the company that you run now called Moonrise. But before we really talk about that, one of the things that I really liked about you when we were working together was you were an entrepreneur before we ever really discussed Moonrise. Can you give our listeners kind of an idea of your career track? So you got out of retail and you got out of the shoe business. Where did you kind of go and what were the different things that you've done so far in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I definitely had more of a circuitous path to becoming an entrepreneur for sure. Obviously, that was my retail stint. Then that's really where it ended. After college, I moved to Los Angeles and I worked in public relations. It was my first job. And I love that job because I think it really sort of brought me out of my shell, right? Obviously in PR, you have to be really outgoing. You have to know how to communicate really well. It was entertainment PR. So there was a lot of high profile individuals that I was dealing with. So it just kind of got me to get over my fear factor really quickly. And something that I say to this day is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that first job definitely did it for me. And from there, I'd say things just kind of started to take a turn. I realized pretty early on that being in LA wasn't the place for me to be. The entertainment industry wasn't somewhere I wanted to spend the rest of my life. So that's when I moved to Chicago and really got into finance, which I know is a complete shift from PR, but got into finance and venture capital. That was sort of my first introduction to the startup world, right? Was looking at various investments, startup companies, and that just intrigued me, right? I always admired these people that were coming up with these ideas and writing business plans. And so I started coming up with various ideas. I wrote business plans. I even presented them to some people in various industries just to sort of get their take on my idea. And oftentimes I was like, this is great, but you kept hearing that a lot. But I sort of stayed in the finance world for a while and then ultimately went to go work for one of the startups that we had invested in. So jumped into business development at a venture-backed company. It was Mesirow backed, about $30 million, called ShopTalk. That was my first experience with like a big startup. Back then it was sort of, the internet bubble hadn't kind of really happened yet. So here in Chicago it was just all the talk. We had this crazy launch party. I still have my towel that I got from that. It was exciting, right? It was really fun, tons of young energy and young minds, and it was great. And then my career took another turn. My husband, then fiance at the time, got transferred to San Francisco for his job. And so I had to go. And obviously San Francisco was sort of the startup world going on. And so dabbled in various, finance type related startups there. But always knew we wanted to come back to Chicago where our family was. But then had another wrench thrown into it in that I got pregnant with my first child. And, at that point, I was obviously elated to become a mom. And so I really thought that's really where my career path would end. I was like, okay, I'm just going to be a mom. And I was okay with that. But then quickly realized that that entrepreneurial bug was just in me, and it was something I couldn't really shake. And so while I was pregnant with my first child, I came up with an idea for, it was called the Little Pink Book. It was essentially, if you're familiar with the Blue entertainment book that's been around forever, it was sort of a take on that, but it was for more local sort of women-led businesses. So it was called the Little Pink Book, and I went door to door and I got stores to sign up and offer a coupon in this actual book. And it was little and pink and cute, and I wish I had one here to show you. I still have them. And I sold them like in the stores. I sold them through charities, different partners. And, it certainly wasn't a huge moneymaker, but I learned a ton. I mean, I remember learning about printing. The first run of books that got printed, the binding was upside down and the name of the book was upside down. And it was sort of this freak out moment, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And finally I negotiated with the printer to reprint the book. So a lot of lessons, but what I really formed were relationships, right? So I formed a ton of relationships with these local merchants in my area. So fast forward, had another kid, and then another kid. That's where it stopped. 3 kids, I'm done. But when I was pregnant with my third, I tried to buy a gift card to a local store in the suburbs for a friend's birthday. I was in charge of getting the gift. And at the time, they didn't have an online website to buy a gift card. And the only way I could do it was either fax in my credit card in this whole form that I had to fill out, or I had to physically drive out to the suburb, which is about 45 minutes away, and buy the gift card. And it was just one of those aha moments for me where I knew I could easily walk into any grocery store and buy a gift card for, a big box retailer, but I couldn't get one to this local merchant. So it was sort of that aha moment of I have these relationships with these local merchants. I sort of understood technology and the intersection there. And I thought, could I convince these local merchants now, instead of offering coupons, would they want to sell digital gift cards? So I started going door to door and asking them and seeing interest. I mean, I literally built a fake website that I showed on an iPad. It was the first iPad ever, I believe. And took it in stores and kind of showed them what it looked like. And it was sort of a resounding, yes, I'm interested in this. So I quickly found a developer. I never laid eyes on him. I think he worked in some dark room in Boston. And he built me my first website. And I signed up a handful of merchants here in the Chicagoland area. And I remember when the website went live and I was waiting to see, like, is someone going to buy a gift card? And the first gift card that we sold on the website was $200. And I thought, oh my God, this is fraudulent. Like it's too high of an amount. Turns out it was a real gift card. And from there, it just evolved. Fast forward, I ended up raising 3 rounds of capital for that business. We scaled it into 27 markets. We had thousands of independent retailers on the site. We were sort of the high-end website for high-end luxury gift cards. The average amount loaded on our gift cards was double that of typical big box gift cards. We were able to get between 15 and 20% of the revenue share with the stores, and ultimately ended up selling that business. So it was just, I think, there are a lot of lessons along the way, a lot of tears, a lot of learnings, a lot of struggles, as you can imagine, growing a business and scaling it. But, I don't regret any of it. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And it's ultimately what led me to my current role, which is how you and I met, which was Moonrise, which was really what resonated with me about Moonrise was that Moonrise is a 2-sided marketplace. And my last company, Giftbar, was also a 2-sided marketplace, right? I had consumers on one side and the individual stores on the other. And Moonrise was very much the same thing in that we were going to have workers on one side and employers on the other. So I inherently understood sort of the challenges with building up a 2-sided marketplace and what that entailed. And so when I learned about Moonrise, it was just this sort of moment of here's, I can take sort of what I've learned and apply it to a new model. And on top of that, Moonrise had a mission, right? It was very mission driven, as you know, which was really about helping financially challenged individuals gain access more easily to supplemental income. And so that mission really resonated with me, being raised by a single mom. And I'm still with Moonrise today. So, clearly it's been not your typical path to get here, but I've loved every part of it and wouldn't change any of it.
Well, yeah, that's what that's why when we were working together, I was drawn to you and your leadership of Moonrise, because I have the same type of deal. Very winding path, not linear, feel odd in certain
Yeah.
conversations sometimes when you get that question of like, oh, what do you do, or what have you done? It's very
Yeah.
difficult. So I love it. Can we take a step back, and can, for our listeners that aren't have never heard of Moonrise, can
Yeah.
you maybe talk, what is Moonrise? Where did it start? What were kind of the origins of that, and what is the mission?
Absolutely. So Moonrise has very unique origins, as you know. So we are actually owned by American Family Insurance, and it's not always readily apparent why a large insurance company would own a staffing platform, but it actually is very much by design. So American Family Insurance, obviously large Fortune 300 insurance company, have many other wholly owned subsidiaries as part of their enterprise. And one of those companies is another company called the General, which your listeners may be familiar with. The General, sort of non-standard auto insurance. An American Family, they had acquired the General a number of years back, and they started noticing some interesting behaviors, particularly with policyholders of the General. The General is non-standard auto insurance, so the thought is these are individuals that are sort of less on top of their finances, most likely lower credit scores, things like that. But these policyholders were phoning into their call center on a weekly, if not daily basis, kind of saying, hey, I know my premium is due. I'm going to be, $25 short. Can I pay that next Tuesday? And this was interesting to AmFam because of the thought that these were sort of individuals that were less on top of their finances, their behavior was showing the exact opposite. Hey, like, I'm really on top of my finances here. I don't want to be late. How can you work with me? So they thought, let's kind of dig into this a little bit more. The General as a company had really strong brand loyalty, strong brand recognition. They thought, are there other services that we could potentially come up with to offer these individuals that would help them? So they ended up sort of leaning into that and spending the better part of a year sort of researching that exact problem. So they flew around the country. They met with dozens of policyholders in their homes, sort of asking them, leading questions like kind of what keeps you up at night? What are some of the challenges that you face? And they were just fascinating conversations. So they really learned some interesting things, mostly that these individuals, for the most part, all had full-time employment, but yet they were still struggling to make ends meet. So when they looked to them and said, well, have you looked for another job, or do you have a second job? It wasn't easy for them, right? A lot of them didn't have time to find a second job. A lot of them, if they had a second job, it was, oftentimes a bad experience, right? So they would go and work for, an employer that wasn't that reputable, and they wouldn't get paid. So just a lot of challenges there. So AmFam thought, could we come up with a platform that could help them? So they kind of went and came up with a whole bunch of different ideas. One idea originally was something called the weekender. So the thought was, could they offer them different types of jobs just on the weekend? But when they took that idea back to them, they were like, well, that's great, but I actually work a second job on the weekend, so that's not going to work, right? So kind of going back to the conversations again and iterating on that idea, and ultimately they landed on this concept for Moonrise, which was really offering these individuals a platform where they could be in control, right? It really gave them the flexibility to pick up shifts from reputable employers when it was convenient for them. So they could pick up one shift a week, they could pick up 10 shifts a month, whatever they needed to earn that extra, whether it's $50, $400, whatever it was. So they piloted this idea in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where AmFam's headquartered, for a couple of weeks. It was supposed to be longer, but due to insurance reasons, as you know, Mike, it couldn't. But it was very successful in that these individuals were able to earn on average over $100 during that time, and employers were really happy with having access to, trainable, reputable individuals to pick up these shifts. So after that pilot, AmFam said, this is really something that we want to get behind. And so they decided to launch Moonrise as a full-fledged, wholly owned subsidiary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing story. I was lucky to be a part of it. There are a couple things like I just want to add to that for our listeners. I mean, I think what's really interesting is the whole process that we went through is we used a process really called design thinking to have our potential customers lead us to the solution. And that was super cool from my standpoint. So if people are, wondering about design thinking, or wondering about innovating in a large company, right? I mean, there are teams at certain companies, and they're trying to figure out how we can do things differently.
Yeah.
And I think AmFam was a great example of that. Venture capital team, innovation team, And so I encourage people to learn a little bit more about design thinking, because design thinking and entrepreneurship, and if anybody's heard of, lean startup, like they all kind of go hand in hand. And it's about really running small experiments, testing things and getting feedback to let your customers or your potential customers lead you to that. And I think, in your backstory, you were really talking about that too with Giftbar. I made a fake website, right? And I would show it to
Yeah.
people, right? Instead of spending $5,000 on building out an actual website, you were able to wireframe something that worked just good enough and spend maybe $0 on that. That's an example of a skill set really that I kind of talk about and advocate for with people. I think that's a really important skill for the future, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. I mean,
Yeah.
So
I think you touched on in that, at the end of the day, human design, research is really about, you're trying to solve hard problems, and problems that you don't fully understand are really hard to solve, right? So unless you go directly to source and try and get inside the mindset and the day-to-day lives of the individuals that ultimately you're building this product for, until you do that, you're really not going to get it right. Right. And so it's, what I love about what AmFam did is, to your point, is just that. I mean, they really went right to the source and said, what are the problems? What keeps you up at night? How can we help you? And then kept iterating upon what they were hearing and coming up. And they came up with, I believe, 34 different ideas, services. And of those 34, only settled on one, right? And it's not the other ones were horrible ideas, but they really just weren't going to work for this use case and for this type of customer. And so I think it becomes critical when you're starting these journeys. I mean, you're right in that when I think back to my experience with Giftbar, and I was really trying to solve a problem that I had, so the question was, if I'm having this problem, are other people having this problem? So let's test it out and let's see if I'm correct.
Yeah, exactly. I think what was also really interesting was, I think the line that I heard in a big meeting was, 5 years ago, if we would have said we want to solve this problem, we would have spent $10 million and never talked to a customer, and we would have built Uber for, the general, and we would have not nailed it, right?
Yeah.
But what we did is, again, you go out in the field and you actually talk to people. And doing that is like it's empathetic, and it's the opposite of arrogant. It's us all acknowledging we don't know the right answer.
Yeah.
And so we need to dig, instead of saying, I know what X, Y, or Z person needs, right? And it's a massive, change in how it's done. And again, I think in the world of startups and the world of entrepreneurship, like, that's common language. That's
Right.
what happens at Amazon every day, running hundreds of experiments, right? It's not happening necessarily at other types of corporations. Yeah. So it was a really cool experience. I'm glad I was a part of it. And then we, of course, found a perfect person in you to kind of lead it on. So I want to talk a little bit about, I want to talk about Moonrise as a company, but I also want to talk about, maybe start with Moonrise as the platform. What types of jobs are people getting matched with, and how is that sort of working, or how has it evolved since maybe, the last time you and I have talked about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially when we launched Moonrise, we were exactly that. We were an on-demand platform meant to match up, financially challenged individuals with reputable employers for shift-based work. So that meant, one of our first clients and biggest customers was enterprise car rental, right? So we worked with over 90 branches here in Illinois, and we were filling shifts for them, everything from car detailers to lot attendants, things like that. So hourly based work, right? That was very easy to train. We say that all of our shifts should be trainable in under 30 minutes. That really individuals that potentially had no prior history of working in enterprise car rental could easily do, right? So we onboard our workers, we do everything from a background check. Obviously, in that case, there's an MVR, current valid driver's license, all of that. But once they're vetted and onboarded, we then match them up with those shifts. That is all done via an algorithm, right? So we take into account their location, their availability, their preferences, things like that. And then they're matched up with these shifts. It's all via their phone. So we text them the shift. They simply reply back, yes or no, they want it. They're given all the pertinent details, when to show up, what to wear, all of that. They show up, they clock in through their mobile phone, they work their shift, clock out, and then they're also paid instantly. One of the big value add propositions that we had with Moonrise from the beginning was the thought was, could we pay these individuals, upon completion of their shift? So to this day, I think it's a huge value proposition that we offer, because we do it free of charge. So a lot of same day pay platforms that are out there, particularly for gig workers, will offer same day pay, but they tack on a pretty egregious fee to have the workers do that. So that's something that we don't do. So with that, we work with, large employers. We work with, as I said, enterprise. We work with companies like Nordstrom's doing sort of inventory tasks. We work with 1-800-Flowers. We've worked with, more local companies like moving companies. We also worked with hundreds of American family agents, right? Doing administrative sort of customer service type roles in the agents' offices. So that's really what we were doing and kind of chugging along for a while there. I would say about a year and a half into it, what we noticed was the platform that we had built to facilitate this type of work, right? So really an end-to-end staffing solution. So everything from recruiting a worker, onboarding a worker, taking care of their paperwork, everything from their I-9 to, tax work, tax payroll work, all of that. We had to build ourselves, right? There were other vendors we could use, but to do it in the manner that we wanted to with a large on-demand workforce, it was easier for us to build it ourselves. So then once you onboard that worker, everything from matching up with the shift, the clocking out, the clocking in and out, the invoicing to the client, paying the worker, all of that was something that we had built. And we realized that this platform could actually be useful to other large companies that have large, hourly workforces that they staff. It could also be useful to other staffing agencies, right? So we kind of started going down this path of offering our platform. So a platform solution in addition to our on-demand business. And we were kind of chugging along and doing that. And then COVID hit. So like many businesses, ours was, drastically affected, right? As you can imagine, kind of overnight, we lost close to 90% of our shifts, right? And one of the first calls we got was from Enterprise Car Rental saying, hey, we just can't have temporary staff coming into our branches anymore with this. So we're like, okay. So, when that happened, we're going back almost a year and a half now, right? It was sort of like every company, sort of panic mode sets in for a while. Like, what are we doing here? How do we help our workers? For us, what was paramount was really that we had a huge supply side of workers that were already, living paycheck to paycheck. And we thought, gosh, how can we really continue to help these individuals? So knowing that a lot of our clients had sort of, closed down their businesses, we thought, well, the first thing we can do is offer our services free to any essential business that is in need of labor, right? So that was the first thing we did. We kind of put out, the messaging there to essential businesses. So grocery stores, whatever manufacturers are still in business and whatnot. We did that for quite some time and we're able to keep some of our workers working, which was great. But then I would say about 6 months into the pandemic, we started getting calls from the American family agents who said, hey, my office is closed right now, but I'm still really in need of someone to help me with really prospecting, right, and lead generation. And they said, would there be a way for your Moonrisers to help me remotely? And at the time, to be honest, we said no, because we did not have a platform that could facilitate remote work, right? It's just not what we did. And we looked into sort of using a third-party vendor to help us with that, sort of have our workers be able to place outbound calls, things like that. And just, it was kind of cost prohibitive. The margins weren't there. So again, we said, no, we can't do it. And then we thought about it some more and we said, we have a really talented team of engineers that's kind of sitting around right now with not a whole heck of a lot to do. And we thought, could we build something ourselves? And we ended up doing a little bit of digging. And sure enough, we ultimately ended up building out a cloud-based outbound call-based platform to allow our workers to make outbound PII compliant calls for these AmFam agents. And we piloted this at the end of last year. And I'm super excited to say that it was a huge success. And we are now scaling this out into several other states within AmFam. And our hope is to have the entire AmFam agency force, utilizing this platform going forward. And obviously, we're in talks with other large carriers to have them utilize the platform as well. So it's been sort of a win-win for us in that we're able, in some ways it's better because if you think about Moonrise prior, we really were a two-sided marketplace in that we had to go market to market and build up a supply and a demand side in each market that we went into, right? So we started out in Chicago, then we're going to Wisconsin, Indiana, and all these other markets. With this, because it is a remote-based business, we can onboard workers from anywhere in the country to do this type of work. So it really allowed us to expand upon our mission of helping as many people as possible, right? And same with the agents, they can be in any state, we can facilitate that type of work.
Wow, I had no I had no idea you guys did all that. I mean, that
Yeah.
is a lot of pivoting,
Yeah.
and being nimble on your toes. It's also really interesting. Like, again, this is a startup within a corporate structure, and to me, it sounds like there's probably a little bit of relief there in that. Okay, the corporation's actually finally, you know, bringing some, I don't want to say value, but like,
Yeah.
bringing an opportunity. Like, this is actually,
Yeah.
you built a platform, and now you can really solve a problem. You can kind of push a button, and there's demand there, and
Exactly.
it's
I
really,
mean,
yeah, it's really neat.
there's no doubt that it's a win-win in that, for Moonrise, obviously it's allowing us to offer shifts to our workers, right? And for the enterprise, for AmFam, it's allowing their agents to hopefully be more successful, right? And add those premium dollars to their book of business, which is great. I think this platform, there's obviously other use cases, right? So it truly is an outbound lead generation, lead nurturing platform, right? So we can work with, any type of business that is in need of that. We know that most businesses that, have to rely on a book of business, their leads are drastically undertouched and underutilized, in many cases not touched at all, right? And so where we think we're a little bit different from a typical call center that's out there, or a telemarketing company that may offer this, is that because of the way our platform operates, it really is turnkey, right? So there's no long-term commitment, right? It's like you can literally put in a shift for 3 hours if that's all you want this week, right? So it's really about how they can augment their staff in a remote way when it's convenient for them. And we think that at our price point, because we own all of the technology, we built it ourselves, and we own our labor pool, we're able to offer this as a much more affordable hourly rate than if you were to outsource this to another company. And right now, because we built this with AmFam agents in mind, it's very much geared towards the insurance industry. We could certainly, work with other industries as well, but I think we definitely have pretty good line of sight into what those agents really need out of this platform and what makes it easier for them, to help them continue to build that book of business.
I imagine quality control is somewhat difficult. Like, how does training work, or how do you sort of manage quality in that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yes, I mean, it's certainly important. So we have a pretty, rigid way that we screen our workers, right? So in some ways it isn't different from our on-demand business, right? I mean, we have ask a series of questions online. They then move to a phone screen. We then have assessment-based tests that we give to our workers. And then we do some sort of, dummy shifts, if you will, where we can sort of engage with them and see, is their voice friendly, all of that. And after that, we certainly give them shifts, but we're fully transparent, right? So the agent has full access to listen to those calls whenever they want. The very first call that all of our Moonrisers make is to the agent, so they can go over the script with the agent, so the agent can decide, yes, or here's where I'd like you to say this. So yeah, I mean, QA is obviously really important. It's not to say we haven't had some issues. I think any call center would, but I think for the most part, we've really been able to maintain that caliber of worker that the agent's looking for.
Very cool. So I want to talk a little bit about Moonrise, the company now. Like, for listeners who are saying, man, this is a cool company. Like, they got a mission and they're helping people, right? Like, give us a little bit of, what are the types of roles that you guys have had to staff for in scaling this business, that are important, right? Like, I try to give the audience a little bit of flavor for the roles, the skills, like, where's the job growth, and what are the types of things that are needed at a company like Moonrise?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it's sort of in some ways constantly evolving, right? In other ways, it's really having an incredible core team that's super flexible and really willing to dig in, right? I think any startup will tell you that you really need team players first and foremost, right? Because every day is different. I mean, as I just described to you, we went from one business and then sort of pivoted to another. And it's like, we have people that never worked at a call center. I mean, I didn't have any experience with a call center. I mean, to be honest, no one at our team had experience in staffing when we started Moonrise, sort of the irony of it all, right? But I've always said, like, if you honor what you don't know, right, it's really easy to find those individuals that you think are gonna, be a great team player, right? And so we really work really hard to make sure that everyone on our team is in the right place. So obviously we have our engineers, and they're, our CTO kind of has his own way of sort of figuring out who rises to the occasion there, right? I can't code, so I can't assess that. But I will say our engineers, I've often heard that engineers just want to build cool stuff, right? As long as they're building cool stuff, they're happy. And I think to a certain degree that is true. But I have found, at least with Moonrise, that our engineers want to be a little more involved than I thought they would, right? I mean, they're really interested in the business part of it and the customer's journey and how what they're building is affecting them. And they want to be involved. And so having those type of discussions, I think our engineers are really engaging and want to, be a part of the rest of the team. On the other side of it is really our Moonriser side, right? So we have a recruiting team, we have an account management team, and then we have our customer success, right? So obviously when we have workers that are out in the field, which used to be 24/7, now it's mostly just during the day, but we have individuals there that are sort of manning our, helpline, if you will, around the clock in case, they can't, if you're doing a remote call shift and you can't access the internet, right? It's a huge problem, right? You can't sort of make those calls. So things like that, troubleshooting. But I would say it's really about, there's all sorts of different roles, right? So obviously, like I said, you have sales, account management, customer success, engineering. We have typical HR, finance, those types of roles. But for me, it's, there's two things, right? There's a process to get things done, and then there's people, right? And you can have the best process in the world, but if you don't have the right people executing against that process, the process doesn't matter. And on the flip side, you can have the worst process in the world, but just awesome people executing, and they're going to get it done, right? And so it's really about, how do you kind of find that, happy medium where you have a process in place, because you do need a process certainly to scale things, right? But how do you ensure that you have the right team in place? And so, I'm always mindful to have my team really be cognizant of what are they doing on a daily basis, what are they doing on a weekly basis and a monthly basis, right? And, because sometimes, I'll have someone on my team come to me and say, like, I really hate doing this and I'm doing it all the time. But then when you have them really sit there and write down how often are they doing this, it's not as much as they think, but because they hate it so much, it's consuming their entire day in their mind, right? So really trying to decipher kind of what's going on in the lives of your core team, and then figuring out, how can we fix this, because then you realize something that they hate doing, sounds like, it's in a role, maybe if someone in sales is doing something that account management should do, but you realize, we don't really need we don't need a whole nother account manager, right? We just need, maybe it's just data entry, right? Maybe we just need to find a part-time person, or maybe this is something that our customer success team can take on, and do. And maybe it's really only an extra 5 hours of work a week. So really trying to always look at everyone on your team and what they're doing and what they like and what they don't like. We always say to our team, our goal is to have them be able to apply for, the next job, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever it is, and get that job, right, at that next level. We don't expect people to stay with us forever. We want them to spread their wings and learn as much as they can. I mean, we've been fortunate that we haven't had a ton of turnover. But I think that's really a testament to really allow people to find their rhythm within Moonrise and find out, what works. We've had people, we had an amazing, Cassie was our account manager, hired to be an account manager, and she was awesome. And she's now a product manager, right? Because she was just amazing at it and really took an interest in it and wanted to move over to product. And she proved herself to be, able to do so. And now she's in product. So we had to go and find another account manager that was as awesome as Cassie. But, those are the kinds of stories that I love, because that's how you keep a team happy and engaged. And that's how you get someone to sort of come to your company and look at all facets of an organization and really think about themselves and their role and what they like to do and what they don't like to do. And are there opportunities to learn and completely move over to a different role in that organization, which I think is really important when people are looking for jobs.
Yeah, building the infrastructure, if you will, to cultivate a great team and keep people happy and growing, I think is one thing. Getting great people, right, to begin with is difficult, because I feel like today there's obviously a lot of great smart people, but you hear all the time, like, it's really hard to find the right person. And there's technical skills and there's soft skills, right? Or there's technical skills and some other bucket of intangible.
Yeah.
How do you sort of how do you hire that A player? How do you account for the intangibles? I mean, I want to bring it back to, like you said, honor what you don't know, and you said something in the beginning of our conversation about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I think those two things, it's sort of that intangible of what you need in a startup, but I think it's sort of increasingly more sought after, that flexibility. How do you hire for that?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's not always easy, right? I think that with Moonrise, we've done a really good job with sort of adapting our hiring process. So it's everything from, obviously, we post a job and people apply. We look through the initial, like anything. I mean, you look through the initial screen of the resumes, and I think that, to be quite honest, can be one of the most frustrating parts for people, right? Because you just don't know what someone's screening for. We don't use an ATS, right? There are a lot of companies, as we know, that just are screening for certain words on the resume. We're not, big enough to where we have to do that, right? But I will say, you're getting a big influx of resumes. You can only have people read through so many. So some of it is just the luck of the draw, unfortunately, right? I'm sure there are resumes that we've skipped over, unintentionally, right? But we sort of narrow it down to those resumes that we think there's something within those resumes or the cover letter that have stood out that we really think, okay, this warrants, another look. We have an initial, our HR head of people does this sort of initial screening and is looking for various things, right? Cultural fit, trying to glean from this individual, what are they really looking for in their next opportunity? Assuming it seems to make sense. Our next is a series of interviews where it's really a series of interviews, and we try not to make it too intimidating or too time consuming, right? But we try to give a great mix of different people in the company. So you're interviewing with folks that you may never really work with one-on-one, or cross collaborate really even, but it's important that you meet with this individual and they get a sense of what you're like, because ultimately it's all part of the culture, right? And so we do sort of these team interviews. We try not to make it more than 2 to 3 on one, right? And it's really a chance for our team to just get to know this individual on a more personal level, right? I mean, we try to stay away from, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, some of those patented questions and answers that you're going to get. So we try to look for more personal questions, really try and dig into, does this person, sort of pass the muster, if you will, right? How do they think? How do they problem solve? Obviously, some of the questions that I guess are more patented, but are pretty telling, sort of describing experiences and problems that they've solved for and how they've approached it, right? Because a lot of that, but I think it's really, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's really oftentimes, for me personally, it's sort of my gut instinct oftentimes, right? But I think we've been fortunate. We have, so many people on our team are just, good and kind people, right? And they look for that in others, right? And it sounds crazy, but that can come through in an interview, right? You have some people that come in sort of guns a-blazing, and they may be the smartest person in the world, but they just come in so aggressive and so that it's off-putting, right? And our team immediately is going to be like, whoa, this is a little too much, right? So it's really trying to find those individuals that are just authentic, right? That just come in and can really be themselves. We think those are the types of individuals that will really thrive at Moonrise, right? But also, I can tell you, one point we were doing an interview, and it was myself and our CEO at the time who was interviewing this person, and it was a customer success role for manager of the CSAs. And I realized everyone loved this individual. When he came into the interview with myself and our CEO, he was crazy nervous, right? And I realized, I thought to myself, this is a really bad dynamic, right? You have the CEO and the COO with this person, and he's really nervous, and we're just not allowing him to shine because he's just so nervous. And, we never did that again, right? We just realized that is just a bad 2-on-1 interview, and it's not setting that person up for success. And so now we try, certain roles, obviously I need to interview direct reports and whatnot, but otherwise I just sort of pop in, right? I'm like, hey, I just kind of want to introduce myself and just make it seem less scary, right? Like, we're a family, just want you to know I'm here and I'm available for any questions you might have. So I think trying to make it a more relaxed environment. And we've been told by everyone that we've hired that it was a great, recruiting and interview experience. So while we're always looking at it and trying to make sure, and right now, as I'm sure you're hearing with podcasts, it's definitely a challenging environment. Things are just really different, and, things are still settling from the pandemic, and it's definitely not over. And so no one knows where that's really going to shake out. But I think ultimately it's about being authentic, in the process, in the experience, maintaining those touch points, letting people know every step of the way where they're at in the process, and being honest and giving that feedback.
Are you guys back in the office? Are you planning to come back to the office? How is that going?
So we are not really all back in the office. We do have certain in-office days. Now, having said that, people can go into the office. They've been able to go in the office if they want to for quite a while, in the sense that there was a sign-up sheet, so we made sure that numbers were where they needed to be. But we have a lot of individuals on our team that live in one-bedroom condos with no outdoor space and just really wanted somewhere to go and work, and you couldn't go to a Starbucks and work, and so we felt that we had to give that as an option. Going forward, we renewed our lease for another year. We said, we will keep the office. It is my hope that people, especially now that more people are vaccinated, that will start to go in a little bit more. But keep in mind, Moonrise as a company, we always had a really liberal remote work policy. So even before COVID, we were all only in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the rest of the time, while I and other people on the team were in the office, many, especially the engineers, were only in 2 days a week. So for us, when COVID hit, it wasn't that huge of a leap to fully go remote. We make, generous use of Slack. But having said that, I think, in-person meetings, there's definitely value there. I miss seeing the faces. I sort of, you sort of take for granted those moments when you're just walking to the bathroom and you pass someone's desk and you stop for a minute to chat about their personal lives or whatever it is. And those moments are missed, right? And so I think to get those back, I think is important. So on some level, we will look to, if we're not all back in the office, I think what we will do now that things are open up here in Chicago is look to do more in-person, team events, fun outings, things like that.
Cool. And are you guys hiring? What types of roles are you looking to?
Yeah, we are hiring. We have a couple engineering roles open right now. We have business development roles open. We have an account management role open, and we have I believe a customer success role open.
Very cool. I wanted to ask you also, do you have any interesting stories about how somebody caught your attention in the hiring process, or like one of your HR members? Like, I came across a LinkedIn post the other day where a guy used Venmo, and he Venmo'd a guy. This was, I think, for a content position, like a writer.
Yeah.
He Venmo'd a request for $50,000 for this contract writing assignment, and it totally like caught the guy's attention. He wrote up this huge thing on LinkedIn and totally interviewed the guy, immediately.
Yeah.
It was like, just because it was so different.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't have any stories as awesome as that with Moonrise. I mean, we've just had, we've had some where, I'm old fashioned in the sense that, so many people now don't give a cover letter. So many people now don't send a follow-up thank you email, which personally I think is tremendously important. But so those stand out. But I will say, not at Moonrise, but when I lived in LA, there was the company I was working for, someone had sent in this box. And when my boss at the time opened it, it was a shoe. And it was a resume with a shoe, said, I hope this gets my foot in the door. And I thought that was creative. And, I've always remembered that, like, all right, but you're right. It's sort of like Venmo. I mean, anything that I think is going to differentiate you and set you apart from the crowd nowadays, by all means. I mean, I personally haven't witnessed anything as creative as that, but I would certainly take note of it. And I would want to interview those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I like that. Get the foot in the door. It's a little cheesy, but it works, right?
It works, right? I mean, you take the effort, one shoe, put it in there. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Where can people learn more about Moonrise or you? Tell them where they can get a hold of you.
So you can go to our website, which is moonrise.works. You can email me at kara@moonrise.works. And I'm on LinkedIn. But yeah, there's, plenty of information on our website.
Awesome. Kara, so great to catch up with you. Thanks so much for doing this. It was a pleasure. We need to get together in person next time I'm in Chicago.
Yes, absolutely. Or hopefully I'll be coming to Madison one of these days.
Oh yeah.
I've been there in a while, but I would like to. I miss my drive. So no, thank you so much. This has been great.
All right. Thanks. Take care.